Welcome to Radiologists, a podcast by University Medical Imaging Toronto, where we discuss the most important topics through the lens of Canada's largest medical imaging department. I'm your host, Satish Krishna, and today our guest is Dr. Masoom Haider. Now, to introduce Masoom to you, we need to go back to one of our previous episodes. So I introduced Dr. David Mikulis to you as the retired gunslinger who was hanging up his boots. The analogy of Dr. Haider is Professor Dumbledore, the greatest professor who ever lived at the peak of his career. Masoom is exactly like that. He is the professor in Department of Medical Imaging, University of Toronto. He is a clinician scientist at Lunenfeld-Tanenbaum Research Institute, as well as the Ontario Institute of Cancer Research. He's the director of Sinai Health Research MRI, and he's the head of Radiomics and Machine Learning Lab at Mount Sinai Hospital. And today, we're going to be talking to Masoom about AI. It's a pleasure to have you here, Dr. Haider.
Thank you, Satish. It's a pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.
Masoom, before we talk about AI, you are working in the largest academic medical department in Canada. And when we talk about academics, we can think about a lot of things. We can think about education, quality improvement. But no matter what we think about, research is number one. What makes research the king of academia, and how did you fall in love with research?
So I think that, the first question you always ask, well, why? Why is research important for radiologists? We are very focused on delivering care through an interpretation of imaging. We're a technology-based specialty. We do lots of teaching. Why should we invest in research, and particularly clinician scientists within our specialty? And I think one of the key motivating factors for our specialty in this is really that we need to demonstrate leadership in this field, the general field of medicine, all the other specialties. And other specialties have access to imaging technologies. Ultrasound is a prime example where many specialties other than radiology are doing ultrasound now. And what is the argument that radiologists should be the leaders? Knowledge is one argument. We are actually academic leaders in that technologic field. We have to support academics. So I think it's important for the future of our specialty to have clinician scientists and leading researchers. So I think that's number one. That wasn't my primary motivation, though, to become a researcher and why I fell in love with research. I think that we all have things that motivate us, and as physicians, our primary motivator is always patient care. And there's different ways of doing that. Patient care is still first, but the technology itself is something that just excites me right from the beginning. And the opportunities when I started radiology were in the computational arena, and in MR. These were the two big technologies in the 90s that I was very excited to do research on. There was an opportunity at the University of Toronto when I came on as a resident to work in both those areas. We had great leaders at that time, and still do, in those fields. And so, and the chiefs of department and the chairs that we had really helped bring that opportunity forward and help foster that excitement and interest I had. So, and those were the motivations and maybe some of the reasons why it's so important.
So, Masoom, that is interesting that you started research because of your love of MRI as well as computational imaging. And how did that naturally transition into AI?
So we're talking about the late 80s. I did my undergrad degree and was really pursuing a career in computer science. And I wasn't even sure if I wanted to do medicine, to be honest. I was in Ottawa, went to medical school there, got admitted there, and went to medical school thinking that, okay, there's going to be a digital revolution in medicine. the PCs had just come out. So it is ancient history now to think about that time. But what happened was as I went through radiology and tried to pursue at that time in the mid-90s this sort of side of computer vision image analysis, what I found was that despite Toronto being leaders in some ways in areas of computer science and having a strong faculty, they were very theoretical. Like, it was very hard. I have written proposals from the late 90s and early 2000s, because we had just gone filmless, about creating a computer vision lab. AI as a concept, it was the winter of AI at that time. There were just databases and large sort of heuristic models. So AI was sort of in the doldrums, but computer vision was certainly an active area of research. The second large technical field was MR. And so I concentrated on that. Sort of developing imaging biomarkers was part of that for 20 years. What happened is that when the AI sort of resurgence happened, I said, okay, I'm still young enough that there's an opportunity to bring all this together. And, one of my mentors said to me once that your career, sort of the minimum you've got to do is in 10-year, if you want to refocus, you sort of do it in 10-year increments. And so I said, okay, do I have 10 years to refocus? And I thought I did. I had the funding, I had the interest, I had some of the experience. And so I refocused on AI around 7 or 8 years ago. And I love it. Like, it's just been amazing. And I did a degree in computer science at Waterloo, but it was in the 80s. And so it didn't help that much. I had to retrain myself.
You did not shift focus to AI or reinvent yourself as the AI guy, but you were an AI researcher right from the start, right at heart. What do you think is going to be the future of radiologists? AI is expected to be integrated into radiology workflows as well as into radiology research in future is going to be massively dependent on AI. So do you think that having a computer degree is just going to be an advantage, or is it going to be necessary for the future radiologist?
So I don't think having a degree is necessary, for sure. I think it depends a little bit on what your goals are. So the first thing I would say is that there's a radiologist as a practitioner, and I think we really do need to see our academic faculties move as quickly as possible in the residency training, and our medical schools in their undergraduate or medical school training programs, really bringing AI education at the appropriate level to all physicians, including radiologists, and the radiologist component needs to be tailored to our specialties. And I think that is happening, but we need to move as quickly as we can to do that. So I think that's some of the foundational stuff. In terms of, actually being an academic leader or positioning yourself, I do think that mathematics, statistics, computer science, engineering, they're important in having that interdisciplinary dialogue. So those fields do have value for those people who are really, strong academics and want to do this. You have to be careful about what program you choose and where you go to do this, because all engineering faculties that do this type of work and computer science are not created equal. Whether it's their undergraduate program, their graduate program, that there are the appropriate opportunities for you to learn what you need to learn to work in our field. And I think that is changing rapidly and growing and different in different faculties.
So what you're saying is that if possible, we need to develop the skill sets ourselves, curated carefully. But what is more important is to surround ourselves with a team who are experts in maybe statistics, engineering, AI, and everything, like have or create the perfect team. How did you get the lab started, your radiomics lab, the machine learning lab at Sinai? How do you develop skill sets to build the dream team?
Someone said to me once that it's easy to be successful at Harvard because everyone's on the same page. They all need each other to academically succeed. And so you don't have to be that good a researcher to succeed at Harvard. But in other places where things are a bit all over the place, you really have to work hard, a lot harder to succeed. Now, that's not a diss on Toronto at all. We have great academia here. So the road to success, and this is what, again, you see me quoting a lot of mentors that I've had over the years. And part of getting that mentorship was seeking it out. So first, seek out people who know more than you. But one of them said to me that, Masoom, the road to credibility is to build independence in your research. In other words, you have to be able to stand alone with the innovations that you're bringing to the field so that people come to you for your collaboration, as opposed to looking for people to help you in your research and expecting them to do it. So you have to sort of be able to attract people. You have to you have to have the skill set, the knowledge, and enough inventiveness. And so that's a lot of hard work, a lot of exploration, a lot of knocking on doors. It's never going to be hand delivered to you on a platter. And there's a certain amount of luck. There is a certain amount of serendipity involved in this. So I would say that hard work, which is obvious, looking for the right opportunities, and really trying to envision what it is that you can contribute that is truly independent research. And what will happen is when you get your first publications in that area, and it can be under the wing of someone else, but once you establish yourself in that area, people will come to you, and then it will build. It will build out, and you'll attract the statisticians and the engineers and the people who will say, okay, yeah, we're interested in this.
So Masoom, that's great advice, to stand independently, to be a great player yourself, that you attract the right talent around you. But let's say that I don't have any coding experience. I don't really have any technical knowledge about AI. But as a radiologist, I want to contribute. I want to explore the field. How do you think a radiologist would be able to get into AI, to contribute to AI? What are your thoughts on that?
What's unique about the AI field is data is a commodity. There is a need for extremely high quality annotated data. High quality annotation requires medical expertise. In other words, it's not sitting there in our RIS and our PAC systems already packaged, ready to go. And the more nuanced and high quality the thinking is on how to amass this information, the more you have. It reminds me of, grade school and having the Bobby Orr trading card, hockey card, is that, you were the guy at recess who had the cards that everybody wanted. So I do think there is another aspect to this for the radiologist who wants to get into AI, but doesn't want to dive or doesn't really feel that their biggest contribution is going to be on the technical side, is to really think hard about the use case, how they want to commoditize their relationships and what they have to produce extremely high quality data. And the reason I say this is because one of the big revolutionary things that's happening in AI is that things like coding and the use of what I would call more standardized algorithms for computer vision and AI research is becoming easier and easier to implement without needing a whole engineering team. So I think that that medical expertise in terms of well-annotated data for a particular use case is a avenue of a radiologist, but it requires some very careful thinking and good knowledge of the field to know how to do it well. So
it means that there is a great opportunity for collaboration producing this high quality annotated data, and it's a request to all our audience out there, try and contribute as much as we can so that we can push the boundaries of AI. In the future, what do you think is going to be the impact of AI, specifically in radiology?
Longer term, to be frank, I don't think anyone knows, and I certainly would humbly say that I have no idea what the long-term picture is. I'll throw a couple of things out there, but it really is almost science fiction. Near term, I think that the obvious areas are ones that augment our workflow. So, for example, the tasks that we're being asked to do day to day is not one that humans were naturally designed for. And I'll date myself a little bit, but I remember when my older boys were growing up, we had the Where's Waldo books. Imagine a Where's Waldo book with 1,000 pages, and some of them didn't have any Waldo in them at all. By the time you get to page 900, it really requires a great deal of concentration and effort, let alone then use all of your knowledge to interpret it correctly, make the proper recommendations, which is really what we want to be doing, the latter stuff. And I think this is where, one of the key things is that designing fancy AI tools is great, but in the end, are people going to buy it? Is there a financial use case that makes sense for this? And I think there is a use case for radiologists getting some help in just sifting through all of this information. So, for example, we're seeing publications come out where, and I'm an abdominal imager, so where adrenal nodules and small renal lesions are automatically picked up and flagged for you as you interpret. Human-supervised, human-aided supervised AI, and vice versa. The AI being augmented with human oversight is certainly one thing. Another example might be, the natural language processing tools around structured reporting. So I would almost view structured reporting as now an outdated concept. We barely even got it implemented, and I think it's outdated. And I'll give you an example. I think it's natural when we're reporting cases to want to speak and interpret and talk as we're looking at the images. There is absolutely nothing that stops this free-form verbalization from being converted into a structured report. And for we've all, I think, who have any interest in this field have played around with some of the transformer models, Chat, GPT, and et cetera. I think it's going to be a much more accurate way of us conveying information. And of course, then you can envision all kinds of spin-offs, automatically the appropriate images being flagged and added to the report. All of this workflow stuff is very feasible today. The problem is what I would call the school bus driver problem, is that we have self-driving cars and being tested. The problem is the cargo. So I think most people would be pretty comfortable if we had segregated routes for trucks carrying cargo, as long as they didn't interfere with human traffic. But if you said, well, hey, I just invented an AI tool and it works 99% of the time accurately, let's put it in all the school buses, I think there would be an immediate aversion. And I think in healthcare, because we're dealing with human beings, their lives, there is a need for a lot of regulation and oversight and careful thinking about how these tools are used, and the need for even legislation changes. So I think for all these reasons, even though a lot of these tools are actually ready to go, that's one of the barriers to get them into our hands today. The other is cost. So this is where we run into a challenge, and I think there are radiologists who are very excited about AI and are convinced that this will not result in job losses. I think that's probably true, but it's not true, I think, for the reasons most people think it's true. I think it's true in the sense that in the long run, there will be a need for expertise in AI-assisted image interpretation in the context of clinical care. That requires a very high level of functioning, which I don't think AI has achieved. The general AI, common sense even, very questionable as to whether we're anywhere close to that yet today. But the fact is that the work we do today is going to be heavily disrupted. I think that one of the few ways that we're going to pay for an AI license to do this stuff is to demonstrate that we can hire one less radiologist in our division. And so that's a job cut. The other thing that's really interesting about AI is just the nimbleness of it. I mean, to develop a new CT scanner technology and get it out, get it into practice is a much longer cycle. Big company, big dollars, big investments. With AI, you can go from a new exciting model like ChatGPT or these transformer models being developed, which is one of the biggest and most exciting developments in the last few years from Google Mind. I don't think they even realized when they put it out how big it was. And now we're seeing how rapidly that technology is moving in application across various fields. And so I think we're going to see this disruptive change happen to radiologists. I think they need to be prepared. I think the long-term story is very good, but be prepared to be a perpetual student to learn and adapt and change. And that will mean some disruptions in income flow and other things that we have to be prepared for.
Masoom, you touched upon the ethics of AI. And I think we've seen way too many post-apocalyptic Hollywood movies to our comfort in which machines or AI take over, like The Matrix in which the machines overrun us, or the Resident Evil series in which Red Queen, the AI, kind of takes over humanity. So I think that there is a growing concern regarding AI. AI is not going to take over humanity. There are other things to be considered. Like, for example, in the movie I, Robot, there is this robot, an AI model. And when Will Smith and another girl are drowning in the lake, it decides to save Will Smith because the percentage chance of survival of him is much higher than that. So I think that is not how a human would think. And I think that's what differentiates AI or machines from humans. And I think that that's why we need ethics. On the other hand, there is this problem in reverse. For example, there's this, you're probably aware, there's this huge study, the Tuskegee syphilis study, which was led in North America, which has been considered one of the biggest ethical disasters in research, in which the US CDC did a study on about, I think, 400 African-American men with syphilis. They left it untreated for 70 years, or something around that, 40 to 70 years, 40 years, I guess, to see what the natural evolution of syphilis would be. But during that time, penicillin was invented, and they could have cured everybody. But just because the study was going on, they did not let the study participants know, and they just left it as it is. And a lot of people died of it because the right intervention was never introduced. Isn't the pushback on AI very similar? We have these tools which could potentially save lives. Due to this concern of ethics and us pushing back, are we kind of losing out on that? Where is the right balance to be had?
So first, I'm not an expert on AI ethics, so I'm going to be a little bit cautious about saying too much here. There are people who, thought leaders and who are really exploring all of the angles on this, and certainly bioethics in general, and this aspect of bioethics is an incredibly important field of study. I'm going to peel this back on a couple of, I think, immediate issues that we face societally around the ethics of AI development, and maybe boil them down to two areas that are, I think, very, for me, down to earth as an academic and a researcher. Is number one, what about data governance and the ethics around that? So is it okay for me to use the data on every patient to develop an AI model, develop a company, and then make money off of it as a hospital or a researcher in a research institute? Is that ethical? Do I need to get consent from every patient to use their imaging or their lab tests or their chart? There's two arguments to be made for this. I'm sure there's more than two, but there's two, right? One is that this will benefit all patients in Ontario and maybe around the world. So in other words, technological innovation in healthcare is one of the tools that we use to improve patient outcomes. The flip side, though, is that in a sense, patients are entitled and ethically entitled to own and have stewardship of their own personal health information. And so how do you balance these two things? And this is something that is actively being undertaken as a topic in every healthcare jurisdiction. So you have extremes like China, you have places like the UK where there's public education efforts happening, you have legislation being changed to kind of at least start to address these things. But it's a work in progress right now. And if we're going to be successful in AI, I think that these things need to happen and need to happen soon. The natural position for the public is to be afraid. This is every time you hear that your credit card number has been stolen again, you kind of think twice about, well, do I really want to have my health information? Do I trust the institutions, public institutions, healthcare institutions to do this? So I think the work is needed. I mean, I think the general position is that if it's not for commercial use, if it's a publicly funded healthcare system, and the general public is paying for it, that there's definitely should be a role for the use of patient data to improve outcomes through the use of AI. The question is, how do you get patient consent, and what's implied consent and what isn't? And so that's one area that's very practical, involves ethics, involves the need for leadership here from people in the academic legal field, our legislators, our thought leaders in medicine, and patients. The second one I would say is the regulatory component. So again, just to be very practical, is what are the appropriate practices to build that confidence that when we deploy and use AI on a Health Canada approved piece of technology or software, that it has undergone the appropriate oversight, let alone and what the liability is if it advises us incorrectly. And so there is an active effort, and it's not Canada alone. Canada, the United States, and UK have started to produce sort of documents on good machine learning practices for medical device development, and you can actually read these online.
You're absolutely right, Masoom. A lot of regulatory oversight is needed. A lot of education is needed, because one of the recent studies mentioned the difference in attitudes of countries towards AI. And as you rightly pointed out, in China, they weren't too concerned about AI, and they were very confident they'd be able to push AI. The only other country which was more confident than concerned was Germany. In the US, it was about 50-50, whereas in Canada, we are more concerned than pushing AI overall. What are your thoughts about the future? Will AI replace radiologists? Will radiologists run out of jobs?
Now we're getting into the fun part, the science fiction part. So I do think that, so I'm going to maybe start with a simpler analogy, and then maybe kind of brainstorm a little bit with you. But, people have used the pilot analogy a lot in our specialty. They say, there's been a lot of automation in flying to reduce costs, for us to have higher capacity, better fuel efficiency. But in the end, there's still two pilots there. And so the radiologist will be like the modern day pilot who is going to, have all this automation to make things safer, better for the passengers and for the economy of flying. There used to be a third pilot in the cockpit who was the engineer. And the engineer's job was to take all the data readings and all of that information and do the calculations and make sure that the pilot and co-pilot knew what their fuel capacity was. All the stuff that the computers handle now. I'm not a pilot, but this is what I've gleaned from the internet, is that they went from 3 to 2. And so it's not that the pilots aren't highly skilled and aren't needed. It's that there's certain types of jobs that are obsolete. And AI is fundamentally disruptive. And it's not a fake technology. Like, there are some people who say, there's a lot of hype around this, and they feel that the hype cycle has gone way out of control and it's going to come all the way down. There's a lot of unknown here. And I do think that the salvation for radiologists is going to be to focus on flying. And by that, I mean patient care. I think that we need to be thinking carefully about all the areas where AI can do the job the same or better than us. So lesion measurement, follow-up changes, where we might just need a light touch with supervision, and replace those with how do we get more engaged in the complex decision-making process around care. So like our tumor boards. And I think that there's disruption happening. I think radiologists need to be prepared, and we need thought leaders so that our specialty and our young trainees and graduates are ready when they come out to move as the field dynamically changes in the future. If we're following all the way, we will see other specialties, including ancillary fields like technologists, nurse practitioners, start to nibble away at our specialty because the technology will be much more movable. So I think there is some, without being paranoid, I think there is some truth to the fact that our job environment is going to change significantly. And I think about the engineer on the plane. At the same time, there's lots of opportunity, but we need thought leaders and research leaders and business leaders within our specialty to help us stay on top of things. It's moving fast.
Ladies and gentlemen, that was Dr. Masoom Haider, Professor, University of Toronto, Director of Sinai Health Research MRI, and Head of the Radiomics and Machine Learning Lab at Mount Sinai Hospital, and me, your host, Satish Krishna. You were listening to Radiologists, a podcast by University Medical Imaging Toronto, the largest medical imaging group in Canada. Produced by Ina Levchuk. Learn more about us at universitymedicalimagingtoronto.ca and follow us on social media at Imaging Toronto. Thank you, everybody. See you on the next one.